Perfect. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so of course, from today onward, we would be leaving that PPT and we would be working on to the completion of the very last topic on the CDS view, which is a VDM, the virtual data model, and then we would be jumping on to the list report. That is something which is on our agenda for today's session. Okay. Before that, let's just quickly walk through the development that we had done in the earlier session, because this is something that we are going to use in the list reports development that we are starting from today. Okay. So what we learned in the earlier session is there are multiple ways of joining multiple data sources. Okay, let's say in this case it's EKKO, EKPO. So we use joins as a one way of joining the data. Another way of joining the data coming from multiple data sources would be the association. Okay, so association, if you see over here, is termed as a lazy join or ad hoc join, because when I execute, it would fetch the data, okay, only from the one which from the projection level properties which I have used, but the associated entities data would only get triggered. I mean, the join would only get triggered whenever I just right click and say follow association. So it means it would only trigger the join when I am actually requesting for the data. That is why it is called as a lazy join. Now, this is a particular view in which I tried using multiple association with something, a term called a cardinality. It says header and the line item are linked with a 0 to n number of records. So for 0 number of purchase order, there can be for the 1 number of purchase order header, there can be records varying from either 0 number of line item or n number of line item. But in case of a header, let's say if I talk about document type, there would always be 1 to 1. Likewise, we also try to reutilize the view which we use, okay, and tried creating something called a company code dashboard, as a part of which we consume the PO dashboard that we utilize, and it ultimately helps us for 2 level of navigation. Okay. Then on the DCL also we learned that we can have access control defined on a literal level condition, which can be a hard coded one, or it can be a user based condition, or at the PFCG role level also we can have a condition defined, using which we can filter out the data a user would be able to see whenever he is executing the report or any sort of object which is developed based on the CDS view on which we have a access control defined, and this can be switched on and off based on this authorization check. This is something we learned till the last session. Now, today, what we would be main focusing upon is, first of all, VDM we already has gone through, called we can have a multiple types of views. Okay, those particular types of view which we would be using over here. Let's say if I talk about the basic view, and the second one if I talk about composite view, this all falls under a criteria called a interface views. Okay, and next one we would be talking about is a consumption view. So what we learn over here is the basic view are the one which would be used for the interfacing of the data. Okay, let's say directly from the transparent table. Okay, so its purpose is for interfacing of the data from the transparent table itself. Okay, and this would be our composition. We also talked about the naming convention. So whenever I talk about interface view, whenever I'm creating an interface view, what would be the naming convention that I'll be using for the development of that interface view? It would be nothing but something I, that is for interface, and the name of the particular view, which I can mention is it is a pretext. It would apply to both the basic view as well as the composite. The consumption view would be the one which would be used for the actual applications development. Okay, and its name would be Z star. Then I can mention it as a, let's say, C for consumption, and then it would be anything free text which you want to define. This is something we can consider as a consumption view. Okay, now let's just quickly define certain consumption view at the CDS level, then we can quick start at the list report designing going forward. Okay, my first purpose, or let me just define a problem statement as well over here. If I talk about the interface views basic view, what we would be using it for? We would be generating a basic view which is giving us a PO header level data. Okay, so this would ultimately give us a PO header level data that would become my basic view. Okay, then we would be having a particular set of data which would be not only the basic data of the PO header level. I mean, it's a transparent data, correct? It's ultimately or we can say the transactional data. We would also adding some sort of master data to it. I mean, let's say, for example, if I consider it as a supplier level data, or let's say company code level data, anything. And I'll be creating a composite view, which would take this PO header data as an input, and this particular view which I am creating as a composite view, okay, would contain this combination of these two data. Third thing would be a separate view which would be nothing but an output gate for my all the data I am trying to expose. So that would be my consumption view, and whose purpose would be ultimately nothing but a final end user's consumption. Okay, now let's just quickly start with this. Let me just give it a name. Just close all of this because I don't need it anymore. Of course, you know how to create a CDS view now. Okay, so over here, what I'll be doing is, let's say, I'll be defining a particular view called a basic view, and purpose we talked about is a purchasing document. So it's an interface view, nothing but an interface view. So I'll just name it as an underscore I can say PO docs, or let's just say purchasing doc. Okay, then I can say basic view for PO data. I'll just go next over here, and let's just define it over here somewhere. Now, as we all know what all things are required now for a view to get generated, let me just quickly give the name for SQL view as well. What would be my data source? So as I am going with a purchase order header data, my data source over here would be the EKKO. Second thing, if I mention over here, then what we would be going through next is selection of a field. What all fields we need as a part of my application's output. So let's say, as a layman, I was using the EBLN, BUKRS, BSART, BSTYP, let's say, okay, ER name and AE date for an example. Now, one thing we should keep in mind, so whenever you are working with VDM, we can say rule-based view development, try to give non-technical name to the columns. Okay. Okay. So let's say, what is the purpose of giving a non-technical name? For example, you are developing this view. You have the application built. Now, other than the technical guys, Okay, someone tries to visit your source document over here. One scenario. Okay, you can say some non-technical guy visits your CDS source document to see what all things are covered, because maybe he might be a functional person who need to enhance the existing application and want to see whether it's already there or not. Okay. Second thing would be, which is the most practical scenario that would happen, is you would develop, you are using a OData service for developing any sort of, let's say, custom UFI application that is configurable. Okay, so even though you are passing 50 information over here, the end user is using the information which you are passing based on his requirement. Let's say today he is needing the EBLN, I mean the purchasing document, he is using that. Tomorrow he wants the company code information also to get populated, but you already have a stuff present in your backend. Okay, so all he needs to do is the configuration. I mean to say configurable, let's say UI app. So what they'll do is they will have some sort of selection where they will find all the list of properties mentioned, and they can directly select from the selection what all fields they want to see on your output. Okay, that is how we can make the application dynamic. Now, if he finds the EBLN, BUKRS, this all the stuff in the drop down to select what all information I will be able to display, then it won't make any sense first of all to him, because he don't know what is EBLN. That's a technical term. Rather than that, he knows what is the purchasing document, correct? So if the person know what is purchasing document, and if in the drop down list we find, okay, purchasing document is there, yeah, I want to display this. So it would become more readable for the actual end user as well, for the dynamic configurable UI application. And VDM is ultimately modularizing our way of development. So it's trying to make it more comfortable for the developer as well as for the end user. So what has been suggested is, whenever we are developing any sort of application following the VDM guideline, try to give a non-technical name to the technical properties you are selecting. And how we can give that? Using as. Okay, so EBLN is nothing but my purchasing document. The BUKRS is nothing but my company code. What is my PSART? It's nothing, let's say, but purchasing document type over here. The BSTYP is nothing but my purchasing document category over here. ER name is over here nothing but, let's say, created by the person who created the purchase order. And the created on. These are the property names that we gave to our particular list of properties that we are selecting. Okay, so this becomes a nothing but a normal view just with a column alias. Okay, so you won't be finding any much difference compared to the one which we have developed earlier. Okay, now to make, or we can say to identify this view as a basic view, what we'll need? We need certain additional annotations. It's just happening over here. Okay, we need certain VDM annotation, because all this while we are saying, okay, there is a VDM which is taking care of, but where I need to mention that VDM. So you would be specifying VDM over here. Okay, and here you can specify view type. Okay, and that view type would be, in this case, would be nothing but a basic view. Okay, so this basic view is the type of the VDM view. Okay, so this becomes a very first view that is containing my particular that is containing my purchasing document header data. Okay. But whenever you are defining any sort of view and with all the given semantics, you should also be able to find what all information it is containing and what kind of technical data it can contain. Okay. If you have worked sometime on the back end, then you would be knowing at a table view level development, there is something called technical settings. Okay. So the technical settings contain multiple set of data or multiple set of information saying what is the type of data, is it a transactional or a organizational master data, or what type of data it is containing. That is something we can consider it as a data class. Then we can also have some sort of category on what are the number of records that can arise that can be in the table. That is something we can consider it as a size category likewise. Okay. So over here, what we would be defining it as one more annotation called object model. So which would be defining the properties of the particular object and will tell what all information it can contain and what is the technical properties of all of those. Okay. So when I'm talking about the technical properties, the very first technical property for any sort of data container or a data source would be nothing but a primary key. In terms of an object model, it is termed as a representation key. So the representation key for this particular view would be the purchasing document, because it is containing a purchasing document. So if the rest control space, you would be finding the key which you have defined over here. If let's say you are defining a view for a purchase order line item, then you can also have more than one key, then you can define it in a square bracket as an array. Okay. And here you can specify a list of keys separated by comma. Second thing which you can define over here is a usage type. And I specified that in a technical setting, you would have the type of data that a view is containing, the type of data a table is containing. Okay, so the data class for the particular type of data we are using over here is purchasing document. What is that? It is nothing but my transactional data. Okay. Third thing you would be specifying over here, but there should be a comma, should be nothing but a size category. That what are the list of records that can be possible. Okay, so let me just show you something quickly. Okay, so if you see over here, there is something called size category, which defines the range of records that can be there. It's not that, okay, you are defining the range and the number of records should fall within this range, but it's just helping the we can say HANA engine to allocate the initial set of memory. Okay, in future, if it exceeds those number of records, then of course a new memory allocation would happen automatically. But initially you have to specify. So let's say if I consider that it's a purchase order, then there can be records in the million. So I can specify it as a, let's say, L. Okay. Then there is something called usage type dot let's say service quality. Now what is service quality? So if I just go over here, then there would be a service quality definition. It says if the view which you are defining is getting the data for less than 2 tables, okay, from less than 2 tables, not more than 3 tables, then it would be of service category A. So in our case, it is getting the data from only one table. So the service quality over here would be A. Okay. So there can be a views which you are building, which are fetching the data across multiple tables. So if it's 5, less than 5, then it would be B, less than 15 would be C, less than 100 would be D. And certain data extraction projects might also be going on. So X is for extraction. So if you are using the CDS view for extracting the data, then its type would be X. Okay, and this particular P is used for certain application logic or some sort of views which are not for a general purpose reuse views which that has been defined. So this is something that you would be using very least. Mainly you would be creating a views consisting of this four, mainly these three, because you won't be joining 100 tables for the purpose, because 15 would be more than sufficient. So I can define the particular service quality over A. Here is the A. So this would create your basic view, which is containing your purchasing document data. Now, remember, the first view that we created is a purchasing document. Now, this view would become basic view. Reason being, it's just containing the data from directly table. We want to have a supplier level data as well. So there can be multiple ways a developer can develop the same object. Either you could create a separate view which is deriving you the purchase order data. Another way of development would be you can directly create a composite view containing one basic view and another data source for the purchasing document data. So let's just go in that direction. Let's just combine the basic view with the table and create a composite view. So I'll just say okay over here. Okay. Then we would be creating one more CDS view, and the purpose over here would be a composite view. Okay. One thing to keep in mind is whenever I am creating a composite view, okay, whenever I am creating a composite view, let's say the naming convention should be _I, because it's composite, but it's an interface view, right? So composite view is a type of interface view. It's not a consumption view. It's an interface view, but its type is composite because it's the composition of multiple type of data. So here I'll be specifying _I, and I can say PO suppliers because it is containing data from, let's say, PO and the suppliers. And here I can say PO supplier data. Let me just give some name also to the view. Say the view. Okay. So for this view, what would be the data source for me? First of all, I want the view which I just created. So this is the data source. This is becoming my very first data source. Okay. So I'm selecting data from this, and next I'll be selecting all the fields whichever I am getting from here. So I can say, let's say, insert all the elements. So I just got all the fields which I declared in the base view. Next thing, I want the company code level data as well. So I can specify association. So when I specify association, it would contain one record from the left hand side table. And how many record of company code table can contain for one purchase order? It would be, of course, a 1. So I can specify 1 to my T001 as I can specify company code over here. And here I can specify on. Now I already taught you what is the purpose of dollar projection. So dollar projection would be picking the records from the projected columns, and when I say projected, it means the selected columns, the column which we have already selected as part of my output. So I can say there is a company code over here would be nothing but my company code over here dot BUKRS. Okay, and here we can expose that particular view. This is one way, but no, I am not satisfied with this particular way. Let's say what I want instead is, as I am going by the particular VDM based development, if I just directly take the view, of course, I'll be getting the technical name. So let's just try to either create a separate company code view, or let's just try to consume the one which SAP is providing. Okay. So let me just tell you, SAP is creating separate views which are used in their development, but as well as they are very generic also. So we can also use them if we want it to be consumed in our applications development. So let's just consider that we are consuming one view over here, which is our on develop view, and the one view which we would be consuming over here would be SAP develop view, I mean a standard view. And these two views accumulately they'll be building a composite view. So if I want to open any sort of such view, I can say navigate over here, open web development object. Okay. Now I already told you, if I want to search for any sort of basic, or we can say, sorry, not basic, interface views, what would be the naming convention for a standard SAP? It would be I underscore. So I can say, okay, I underscore, I want to go with, let's say, information. Okay, let's just say, okay, fine, I'll be, okay, we are going with the supplier, and here we selected the company code, but let's say, I'll be going with the company code information. So for now, let's just say, I underscore, we want a company code data. So I can say, if you see all the views over here are the basic view. I can say company code. So you would be finding multiple views. The one which we are finding over here is the very first that we are interested in, I company code. So this is also a particular view. If you see, it's a VDM view type is a basic one. It is directly getting the data from the base tables. So we will be directly using this view for the purpose. So I can directly replace this over here. Okay. And this particular company code then going forward contain my company code over here. And this I can use. So I now created the view which is combination of a one custom created view, one standard created view. Purpose is the same, that we want the company code data. Okay. Now, as there is a composition of multiple type of data, let me just say VDM. I can say view type over here, and the composite view. This is the name of the view. Another annotation that we would be specifying over here is called the object model annotation. Okay. So the object model annotation we are specifying over here would contain nothing but the representation key, and what it would be, the purchasing document. But this time, what type of data it is containing? So it is containing a mixed set of data. It is containing a transactional data, which is a purchase order data, and the master data, which is a company code master data. So it's a mixed set of data we are using. Okay. What are the number of records that it can contain? I mean the size category. So as the base view over here for the particular data selection is nothing but a purchasing document, of course it would be again containing the purchasing document data, which would be in millions. And the next thing we would be having is a service quality, and the service quality we can think of over here is a beta A, and I can directly activate this. Fine. This is the composite view. So we have the basic view, we have the composite view. The one which we are left with, which we can expose for the applications development, is something called it as a consumption view. Okay, so we would be creating one consumption view as well. Okay, so what we can name it as a set EO underscore C underscore PO data. So we can say it as a consumption view. Okay, so what we would be using over here is SQL I just created, and the view which we have available over here as the composite view would become the data source going forward for my particular view in the output. So I can say this is the view, my bad, sorry, it should be the data source. Now I'll be selecting the list of columns I need. So these are the data I'm exposing, and this would become my actual consumption view. So I can name it as a, let's say, VDM. The view type over here, I can mention it as a consumption view. And again, it would be containing the object model to define the technical properties of the view. It would be more or less same, because ultimately we are not doing any sort of modification over here in the data that we are getting via the final composite view. Okay, so this would become my one of the consumption view. So when I say it's a consumption view, we need to allow the developer to consume this for the application's purpose. And what we need to do for that, we can allow them to write the OData publish for this particular view. But remember one thing, the sequence of this annotation doesn't matter. Okay, so if you, let's say, specify OData.publish over here or the publish over here, it doesn't matter. Whatever is there following in the remaining CDS source document would also be part of the actual OData service document which is getting generated. It's not that if I'm writing over here, then only it would contain the initial information. No, it is not the case. So the sequence of the annotation you are specifying in the header doesn't matter. So this is how it would look alike in the VDM. Okay. Now, as we are mainly focusing on the UI, of course, I didn't go too much into detail for the VDM, but you should be knowing what is a skeleton while you are doing the development as a kind of a full stack. Okay. So this is how your view would be looking alike. Are we all clear till now? Then we can actually start with our list reports, floor plan, its development structures. Perfect. Of course, we would be containing, we would be going through the value health, the model value health, the foreign key association base, everything. But as we also are going to view it visually on the UI, it would be better if I just don't go theoretically in the backend side, but have a UI implementation as well for the same. So that's why I just didn't went through that right now. You would be going through the same while doing the development. Okay. So let's just start with our very first thing over here called Fiori elements. Okay. So the basics that we have used and we have defined in the CDS. Okay. Certain things we have still left out, which we would be directly using in the, which we would be directly defining in the Fiori elements development called metadata extension and the UI annotation. UI annotation. Because this is something that mainly our Fiori elements application is based upon. Now, when I say Fiori elements, okay, so to be more precise, let me just say it's a CDS based Fiori elements application. So when I say Fiori elements, what is the difference between, let's say, normal UFI application and the Fiori element application? Okay. So when I say a normal UFI application, or we can say totally custom UFI application, you can maybe correlate it with a application that you are defining as a plain paper drawing. Okay. Let's say there is a requirement saying, okay, you want this particular UI application as part of your output, where there should be a box, there should be a button over here, there should be another button, there should be a drop down getting the data from one service, there should be another data, there should be a separate button for save, cancel, there should be a button for mail sending, anything and everything on the same page, or we can have multi-page applications as well. But if you see, when I start with the development, it's nothing but a plain paper for me, right? I define the different views, the fragments, or the different controls I define, and just put it on my UI, and the user would be able to find the application that he was willing to see or he was visualizing. So anything and everything is possible on a custom UFI application, correct? Because there is no limitations as such. Of course, if I compare it with the normal .NET based applications or any sort of React.js or any sort of another UI technologies as well, then compared to that, of course, SAP has certain UI guidelines, but still, if I compare this two, I mean the normal UFI and Fiori elements, then normal UFI is still very broader scope. Fiori element application, technically saying, is following certain guidelines, or what we can say it as a design floor plans. Okay, so let's just assume you are one developer of an application, there is another developer of an application, okay, and a user is saying, I want a particular application which is giving me this information, give me a best UI output you can, but there is no requirement that I want this information over here, over there. It would be based on a UI developer's visualization, okay, and he can develop it as and when as he like it really, as he like it personally. So if two UI developers are developing the same application, then it's very clear that when I am developing a normal UFI application, the final output product which I am getting would be different. Of course, the final information I am presenting on my application would be the same, reason being the business has a certain requirement saying I want this information. But from an output perspective, the controls which you might have used, the we can say the execution flow which a UI developer might have defined. Someone might have completed application in a single page application. Someone might have designed a separate views for all of them and might have provided a navigation based application as well, right? So all the things would differ in a normal UFI. Compared to the Fiori element based application is always based on certain floor plan. Okay. So what we can have in a Fiori elements application is very fixed. Okay. So if I talk about the very first list report application, for example, okay. So list report would have let's say a filter bar over here, would have let's say a filter bar available over here. There would be a grid over here. There would be a grid available over here. If I talk about a filter bar, then I can have a button for let's say global search available over here. Then I can have a list of filters available over here as well. Then I can have a button for let's say go, and user can also say add a filters at the runtime, and he can have the filters which are not there available over here. The user can directly click over anywhere in the grid and get the data sorted from a particular list report perspective. But these are the things which ultimately SAP has defined as per the Fiori elements design floor plan that we have to follow. Okay. Compared to the one in normal UFI, it's very open. One difference which is over here, which is this. Second thing, if I talk about the development efforts. Okay. Second thing, if I talk about development efforts, then normal UFI development efforts is bit high compared to the Fiori elements, because Fiori elements UI you can control directly via the backend. Okay, I can say 100%, but ultimately 90 to 95% of the UI behavior we would be able to control via the backend. How? Using annotations. Okay, so using annotations, you can control the behavior whichever you are getting on a UI application. While in normal UI, you have to you have to design each and every behavior. You have to design each and every control. The, let's say, backend calls, if I also talk about the backend calls. So if I talk about a backend call, let's say on a click of a save button, okay, on a click of a save button, whether it should be a post call getting triggered, put call getting triggered, delete, or what is the particular call that I am expecting to get triggered. This is something I have to define and trigger from my UI in a Fiori element application. Okay, in a Fiori element application, this is something which would automatically be taken care by my particular application floor plan. That, okay, if it's a particular object page button, then it would always trigger a get call. If it's a save button, then it would trigger a post call. Okay, so object page will trigger a get call, but if it's a, let's say, save button and the object is not existing, then it would trigger a post call, and if its object is already there, then it would trigger a put call. There would be a delete button which would allow you to delete the object as well, but this, all the things would be controlled by the floor plan. So you do not need to write the custom code for this. Okay, and hence the development effort, if I talk about for normal UFI on a rough basis as well, then normal UFI might take, let's say, 2 to 3 days for a simple applications, compared to the Fiori plan. Sorry, this should be compared to the one where it might take 2 to 3 hours. Of course, there can be a complex application as well that we can develop, and it might take some time. But the normal application, if I talk about, then of course the efforts that you need to put into the normal UFI applications would be higher. Okay. Second thing, the design patterns, if I follow, then the design pattern defined in a Fiori elements application is such that it's very adjustable. It's very adjustable in all the particular devices. So what is the behavior? It's called responsiveness. So responsiveness of the Fiori element application is such that it would automatically get adjusted in all the particular devices. Of course, normal UFI application has also certain built-in libraries, style libraries, which you can follow and can achieve the same. But this is something which is already pretty built in whenever you are defining a particular Fiori element based application. Okay. Now, if I talk about a Fiori element based applications, then what all type of Fiori element based application exists? Very first type that we are going to talk about over here is called a list report application, which would be an application containing a list of report. Okay, so it would be containing a floor plan like this. We would be opening it in the browser and we would be seeing how it looks like. Second thing we can have over here is a object page. Okay, so if I talk about that, this is my list report, then there is a particular line I am displaying, and there is a particular arrow which is opening a particular information in detail mode. Then the second page which you are getting over here is called an object page. It can also have a header section. Okay, and it can have multiple sections over here called facets. Okay, so this particular information which we are finding over here is called an object page designing, and that particular portion come under one more Fiori element called object page. Third thing which we are talking about over here is called ALP, called analytical list page. So when I say analytical list page, then visually analytical list page is a combination of, not 100%, but combination of, let's say, list report plus charts plus visual filters. Okay, so it gives us a functionality that our data would be visually segmented, or we can say segregated in multiple sections. Okay, it would have three sections that we would be seeing whenever we would be working on ALP. One with the data, one with the central chart, and one would be the one which would also be a chart, but you would be directly able to filter the data based on the chart sections. That is why it is called visual filters. And we also have something called KPIs. And the last thing which is also very much used these days is called overview page. Overview page application. So this application I am talking about is being used by multiple group of people. So let's say list report, if I am talking about list report and object page, mostly go in hand in hand with each other in a combination. So this is being used by multiple set of users, mainly for, let's say, field group, the field users, or we can say back office employees likewise. The analytical list page is mainly being used by the higher management, because ultimately it gives all the data in an analytical manner. They have the limited time, so they can have an overview of a data in the same place and analyze the data by multiple verticals, let's say by document type, by self-organization, what is the self which is being happened. This is what ultimately higher management is always interested in. So that is why analytical list page is the most preferable way of presenting the data for a higher management people. The overview page application these days are being used for development of certain cards development. So let's say if I talk about the cards, then we can have a tile, right? Whenever I'm going in the launchpad, the launchpad will only give you the tile information. So it would, there is a possibility that I can give a dynamic tile, but the dynamic tile cannot contain still much of the information. Rather than that, cards give you more information compared to the launchpad tile. So card can be, let's say, you can have a table card, list card, analytical card, stack cards, likewise. Okay, and these cards also, upon click, you can directly navigate to the individual applications, list report applications, and you can have the data directly displayed over there as well. So there's a card-based development is also possible using overview page. Okay, so let's just first find what are the floor plans, and first let's just focus on very first Fiori element application called a list report floor plan. List report floor plan. Okay, so if I just go over here and say okay, so this would become my floor plan for my list report. Okay, this is how it would be looking alike once after we develop it. What all it allows us? It allows us to have a particular UI with a sorry, it allows us to have a UI which would be containing, as I mentioned, a search bar. This search bar would contain, let's say, global search, the filters. These filters can contain a value health, the date selection controls, the filter adjustability. Then a grid would be there. This grid would contain the list of columns we are specifying over here. There would be a setting button. This setting icon would ultimately help us out if you want to show or hide any sort of data, if you want to sort the data, group the data, likewise. Okay. So this all the particular components which you are seeing over here, the same we would be developing over here. If I just go into more detail and just open the one in the web IDE, then it would become more clear. So let me just quickly go over here in the web IDE. Let me just try to start my local web IDE over here. I can go in localhost, just say sign in. And let me just see how the projects would be looking like over here. So if I just go for project from template, then here you would be finding, okay, I have SAP Fiori elements. In the Fiori element, you would be finding a list report. If I just click over here, you would be finding that I have a particular, in the backend side, I have a particular table which is giving me all the information. Secondly, I have an object page as well available over here. This object page has a header section with the image, let's say certain information is also available over here called data points. The information available over here in the sections called facets. The one which are available as a part of general information is called identifications. The one which are available over here in the blogs over here is called a field group. There can also be certain line item reference which would allow you to display the tabular data. Let's say if I am showing the data for, let's say, PO dashboard, then after click of a particular purchase order, I would be navigating to my second page. That second page would ultimately be containing my PO line item information. So what is that particular PO line item information? So that particular PO line item which I am talking about over here is ultimately the purchase order line items that can be associated with the header information. Okay, and we can also integrate it with my final output UI. This is something we would be creating as well. So this is how my final application would start looking alike once after we have developed the Fiori element application. So let's just have a quick view of how my final UI application would be looking alike. Let's just start developing certain backend application first. So for developing any sort of UI application which is containing, let's say, Fiori list report, we need to go step by step. So the step for a list report applications development contains, first of all, base CDS view development. Now we are very clear how to do that. So I'll be quickly developing a CDS view. Then we have to define a list report application, and we would be taking this particular CDS view as data source, and then we have to enhance this particular CDS view with something called a UI annotation to get the required output behavior. Okay. So let's just quickly start with our first list report applications development. Let's just say I am just going in my Eclipse, developing my very first application over here. This is something we would be using for the actual application. So over here, let's just say I am using the normal stuff, normal view over here, just to ensure that we are having a single file for now. Then we would be separating it out based on backend logic and the UI logic as well. How? That is something I'll be also telling you. So let's say I have my very first application which I am building for now called let's say list report application. I can say list report. List report application, let's say. I'll be just going next, let's say, over here. And we would be creating multiple applications, okay, for the same Fiori element. So we would be seeing how multiple scenarios can be handled as a part of the same floor plan. I'll just say, okay, copy the name of the view over here, paste it over here. The information which I'll be using for my data source over here is, let's say, contain EKKO over here. Very first thing. Then I can define it as a, let's say, EBLN for now. 5 information we want. I'm just going step by step from the basics, so it would become more clear. Okay, this becomes my view, the very first view, and I want an application containing all this particular stuff. So what I'll be doing, I'll be creating an OData service out of it. As we have already spent so much time on the learning CDS, so I am making it a bit quicker over here. Let's just name it as, let's say, PO info set. Okay. Now, next thing you would be finding over here is, of course, the one which we have already done earlier is doing on my desktop and saying I want to register this service. You know how to maintain a service now, I guess, right? So I just add service, and over here I'll be saying a local one. What would be the name? It would be the name of the view underscore CDS. So I'll just say okay, and you would be getting the view. I can define it as a, just say this one. We have the particular service running and active with us. Okay, and let me just say dollar metadata, and we have the particular service available with us, which is containing this information. Now we want this information to be visible on my UI. So what I'll be doing is, I'll be quickly going on my web IDE saying project from template. We are interested in my list report applications development. So I'm saying list report, go next. Here, let's just follow certain naming conventions saying, okay, ZEO, we can say. Okay. So I'll just say PO dashboard. The description I can name it as a, let's say, PO dashboard application. I'll just go next over here. You would be finding certain information over here. Let's the service catalog. So in the service catalog, you would be able to choose from the systems that has been configured. Sometime you also might have service URL, so you can also select service URL if you have any. So let's say I am going by choosing a service catalog. So I have the S4S configured, so I'll be just going directly over there and passing the name of the CDS view I am having. And it would trigger, get me the service. So here is the name of the service I am getting. I'll just select it over here, say next. Here you would be finding two files, one the service metadata and the annotation file. So this annotation file is ultimately responsible for your actual UI behavior. Okay. You can also go by selecting any sort of custom annotation file. So what would happen is the VAN is ultimately nothing but an extension of the particular annotations file. So sometimes if you have already annotation ready that as a part of a separate file, then you can also add it over here. Ideally, it's advisable to always have an annotation file which is available over here, and directly selecting it, say next. What would be the data that I'll be displaying on my application? So that would come from the entity set which I define over here. So this is the entity set, the PO info set, which is playing a role over here. Say activate. Okay. So my service is generated and I'll be able to find it over here. This OData navigation also has a part, also has some role to play. So if you just read over here what it says OData navigation attribute to a collection of line items. So maybe this is something we already mentioned earlier, sometime back, saying if I have a PO data, I have a line item information as well. And if I want to display it in a line item section, then I can have a navigation specified over here. But as unfortunately we haven't specified because we are just starting. In upcoming example, we would be considering the line item as well. Let me just say next over here, and you can say finish. I am not going to open my project over here for now. Of course, we would be going in detail what is getting generated. But if I just say directly next over here, you can choose this one, or you can also execute it by the component.js. It is also very straightforward. Actually, there is some issue in the firewall, so it's blocking our local host port. Maybe we just got the issue fixed with the system, but now it's again happening. Just allow me a few moments. I'll just check with the server team. So what is happening is, if you see, this is my web IDE, which is always running on default port 8080. This is taking any port randomly because we are running on the local mode. Now, what would happen is, whenever we are doing any sort of execution, the firewall is blocking this particular port. I already got it unblocked twice, but it's still dumping. Just allow me a moment. I'll just get it unblocked. Okay, allow me a few moments. Just have a quick 5 minutes break. I'll just get this issue fixed. It's a server issue, and I just need to call the server guy. He has something, block something. It's 10:08. Let's just gather back at maybe 10:15, and we'll just cover it after 5 minutes. Okay, I'll just get the issue fixed. Sorry for the interruption. Are we all here? Sorry for the interruption, guys. Actually, the server was not behaving smoothly. Okay. I guess Swapnil, Gagandeep, you all are here. Sukshay, Navan, are you still there?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Let me just reshare my screen and we can just get started. Okay. So, yeah. So this is what we did. I'll just recreate the particular. So there is a PO info set which we just selected, right? Now, if I just go next over here, and I'll just separate project out together again. Now, okay. What was the project that we were trying to create earlier? Okay. So there is a particular CDS view that we are consuming, correct? So what I'll do is I'll just go in my web IDE over here, saying project from template, say next, and I'll just say, okay, I'll just go next over here, select the system, so it is, so it's S4H. Okay. Now I'll just pass the name of the CDS, so I'm getting the list report application. Okay. I'll just go next over here and we'll select the VAN file. So what is that VAN file? It's nothing but an annotation file. And if you see what it's saying, it's annotation selection that I have to use. So I'll just select this, say next, over here. I'll just go next, say finish. Now if I just run it using what it is generating. So if you see the PO dashboard is getting open over here and my application is getting generated. Okay. What I'm currently finding over here. So this is my normal application that is getting generated with a same skeleton that we have found as a part of a Fiori list report floor plan. There is a filter bar. There is a add a filter button, go button. There is a grid. If you see in the grid, I have a setting which is listing down all the particular fields whichever are over here. Here I am able to find the functionality of sorting, filtering, grouping the data, whichever I want. But to my end user, will I always keep asking them, okay, if you want any columns, just select it via the setting button? That is not the way we ideally ask the user, right? Of course, setting gives us a liberty that going forward, let's say if I am displaying 6 columns in default, I have 3 more columns. If they want, they can select it dynamically at runtime. But other than that, the information which I am presenting to them should be in the default layout. So how we can do that? So what I'll be doing over here is I'll be adding certain columns, saying, let's say I'm going over here. Now I'll just keep on drawing a one particular section which would ultimately help us understanding what is the stuff that is going on. This would become my list report. For now, let's say this is my list report and this would become my filter bar. Okay. So we'll be first starting with the table, okay, over here. So this table, if I'm talking about over here, is controlled by one annotation. What is that annotation? It's a UI annotation called a line item. So this line item annotation controls the grid. Okay. And if I want to display 5 columns over here, let's say I want to display the PO document number, the company code, the document type, okay, likewise everything, then I have to specify line item for each and every of them. Okay. So whatever line item I specify over here would become a column for me. Perfect. Next thing, how the system would be knowing if I am specifying line item each and every place that what should be my first column, what should be my second column? Because in a terms of a business, certain data takes priority, certain data is very important, and certain data is there which should be at the end in the grid. So that for that we have something called position. Okay, position would always be in a multiple of 10. As per SAP's guideline, it should be in multiple of 10. It won't throw you an error if you don't specify it in a 10 multiple of 10. But maybe SAP has given it just because that, let's say if you have developed a whole bunch of applications with let's say 50 columns, and tomorrow someone is saying, someone is coming back saying, okay, I want a column in between these two columns. Okay, so will you adjust all the 50 columns positions? No, you have a gap of 10 in between. So you can utilize that and you can directly say, okay, one column I wanted 15. So it would ultimately short the data and you would be able to insert a column in between. That is the purpose. We have a position is in multiple of 10. So in the initial set of design, it is always advisable to go in a multiple of 10. Okay. Let me just say, I want these columns to be part of my output. I'll just say totally fine. I'll just specify @UI dot line item over here, and here it would just say position, and here I'll just specify 10. Perfect. So the EBLN would become my very first column. Like in a header, whatever annotation we specify is for whole view. So these are called header level annotation. And whatever we specify using @ is called annotation. That is something you should be knowing by now. Now, if I specify annotation on just before a column, then there is an annotation specific to this particular property. This is the annotation specific to this particular property. Likewise, I want it for all of them. Now, let's just say I am specifying it as a 30, then let's say 40, 50, 60. So I am specifying 60 over here. And I am specifying 40 over here and a 50 over here. So it would ultimately reposition the column I am willing to find in my output. I'll just say save, activate. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind, whenever I am doing any sort of changes in my application, okay, like this, on the backend side, I do not need to go and register it again and again. The registration portion, the step of registration would always come only once. Okay, I do not keep on performing that particular step again and again. Okay, I'll just say minimize this, and when I just go over here and I just refresh this, what you are finding over here is I am getting these 3 columns, then I am getting the created by, on, and the category. Okay, so we are getting all the columns upon a click of a go. Ideally, what should get triggered? It should trigger a get call. If I just say go, I am getting all the data listed down automatically. Okay, so we are here till the first step. I am getting the data over here, which is fine. But being a UI developer, this is not something that satisfies us. More curious we are to know that how this is actually happening. How actually this particular information is being presented in my output, even though if it is not in my project, even though it is just available at my CDS level, how it is actually reflecting. So to be frank, that's not the case. Let me just refresh this. If I just go over here and say in a web app folder, you would be finding one folder called annotations. If I just open annotation.xml, so this is something which is playing the part for us. Okay, so what you are getting over here is something called external annotation. So this external annotation are the ones which I am providing externally to this project via the CDS. Now, what are the things? So if I just say plus over here, you would be finding line item over here, and you would be finding the data fields. So these are the fields that you are finding in my output. Perfect. Now, whatever changes we keep on doing at my CDS level, if we try on adding any sort of annotation, it would start appearing over here. So if I talk about the Fiori element project, it has multiple sections. Like in a custom UFI where you have the view and the controller, here in a standard Fiori element application, the view and controller is not a common thing. It won't appear by default. What you would be having instead is a annotation file that would be controlling anything. External annotation is the one which is coming by backend, but this is our priority 2. I mean, for the application, it has a priority 2 level. So let's say if you want to override something, then there is a button called this. If you see, just click on it. It says clone for overriding. When you just click on it, it would just copy each and everything over here, and that particular stuff would be open for editing. Currently, if you see, this is gray out, correct? So this won't allow you to edit anything. But once you say clone for editing, it would allow you to edit each and everything over here, and you will be finding it in your local annotation. You can modify whatever you want, and you would be able to change this. But of course, we won't be doing any sort of changes in the external annotation, because we are main focused on how using the backend we can using mostly the CDS stuff, you would be able to control the UI application. But why I am telling this, because it's not always that you would be getting a OData service with a backend annotation. It depends on developer to developer. Certain time you would get an application which won't be having any sort of annotation. So what you can do over here is, if I just say over here, I want to create an annotation. So you can directly say, okay, plus, and here you would be finding something called a line item. So if you say line item, within the line item, you can add all the fields under the data field. And likewise, you can define all the columns. So for the service, for the OData service which you are working, if you are not getting any sort of external annotation, then you can also define that locally over here, but can get rid of the custom codes for designing the UI and directly define it using the annotation file. Clear? One part is over here. Second question which would be coming on to your mind is, how I am getting this particular captions over here? I haven't specified the space and everything. How I am getting that? So for that, what the system is ultimately trying to interpret is, if I just go over here and just say, here, if I just open the technical table saying EKK over here, just right click, that would be more easier to understand. Okay, here you would be finding EBLN. So these are the captions that you would be getting in your output. If it's the width is bit low, then you would be getting it via the field label, which is specifying what should be the short, medium, and long text. So this is something which is appearing in your output in the label. Okay, one thing clear over here. Now, next thing. So this becomes my line item, but this is not the only thing that I am willing to have on my output. We are planning to create at least a separate section. I mean, at least a perfect block for the list report. Then we would be going further in the create, read, update, delete functionality and the value help as well. Before that, let's just say I want certain filters as well. So when I say I want certain filters as well in my output, what I'll be doing? I'll be saying, I'll be specifying one more list of annotation over here. So for having any sort of filters, what we will need? One more set of annotation called UI.selection field. Okay. I can add it over here. Let's say I want a selection field for, let's say, company code, for example, selection field. And here I can say, okay, selection field, and here I can specify position. Let's just say 10. And I want one more filter for, let's say, this particular AE date. So I want one more filter saying 10 and 20. So this is available to me. If I just say activate, I just go back, try refreshing my application over here. You would be finding these two filters available with me as well. Now, if I just say, let's just focus on created on. If I just say, okay, I want certain dates to get selected, let's say from 8th May to the 12th May, for example, I want to filter down my data. I'll just say, okay, I'll just open this, and here you will be finding, okay, if you want a date, then this is how it would look alike. And if I just say contains, or we can say, sorry, between, then you would be getting a from and to. But it won't be good if my user just keep on selecting it like this, right? Because it's a single step approach. I know if it's a created on, then what is the thing I need? I need a date control, which is coming correctly over here, but it should not be at the second step. User should be able to select the date directly from here. That is what my agenda is currently. Correct. So what I will be doing this time is using one more annotation. So let me just introduce to one more family member over here. It is called a consumption level annotation. Okay, so the UI mainly works on the UI control. The alteration of behavior, if you want to do at short of filter level or somewhere, you can perform it using one more annotation library, like we learn ABAP catalog, access control, OData, the @UI. Same way, let's say I am focusing on this, I can say @consumption over here dot, I can say filter. Okay, so the filter I am getting over here, I can directly say have. Okay, so this consumption filter would ultimately help me alter the behavior of the filter as per what I want. So I just say control space, you will be getting multiple information. I am interested in the selection type. I don't like the selection type. It should not be a single always, it should be a multiple. I mean the interval type of how it would be looking like. So I can say interval. Just say comma. Then if I am selecting the date, it should always be a range. Why actually system is allowing me, why actually system is asking me for having a pop-up? Because it is allowing me multi-selection, right? If I, let's say, company code over here, if I just keep on typing, let's say, okay, DR, say RD. So this would ultimately be a multi-selection. But for me, this particular selection of the date should always be a single selection, because date would either come in a single or in a range. So what I'll be doing over here is, I'll just say selection type is interval, but I can say multiple selection over here is false, because I don't want the multiple selection to happen. I'll just minimize this and let me just execute again. If you see, my way of presenting the date has been changed. Now you would be able to select the date, let's say from 9th through 15th of September. If it's not falling in the range, then you won't be getting any data for sure. But if you are getting it directly, let's say 9th of what it was. Okay, let me just, it was 12th of May. So let me just select 2020, enter May, and let's just say 4th till 28th of May. I'm getting this particular data. Perfectly fine, looking for me. Now, let's just be more greedy over here. Don't okay, and try to execute the information we are getting in a more better manner. So let's just visualize the UI, not from a developer's perspective, because being a developer, I know whatever I am developing, I'll be very satisfied with it, because I said, okay, yeah, I am doing it really great. But from a end user's perspective, what would make their life more easier for the end user? Okay, for example, I am getting this information over here, which is totally fine. How many records are there? Any idea? Can anyone calculate this? It would be a very tedious task if I just keep on calculating, okay, how many purchase order I have and within the particular range, and if I'm passing the filters and everything. So we would be having one more annotation. So currently I am talking about scattered annotation always. So you would be finding, okay, I'm once going with the line item, then again I'm going back to selection fields and consumptions and everything. But I want to make you understand at what all levels we can have the annotations. Okay. Now, let's just say I want to have a list of annotation available over here. Secondly, this standard doesn't also look good over here. What is the information I'm displaying over here? It says purchase orders. These are the purchase orders, right? So it should show as a purchase orders for me. So what I'll do is, I'll just say, this is something called my attribute or property level annotation. The one which we are trying to show over here, the data is at the out of the attribute. It's at the full table level information. It means it's the header level information. And what it would be? I can say UI dot header info. So this header info would have something called a type name. So the type name over here which you are getting over here is for multiple records. So that is why it is plural. Plural in grammatical language in English, it is called more than one. Okay. So the plural name I'll be specifying over here is called purchase orders. Okay. And I'll just say activate this. Here you would be getting the purchase orders with 87 records. So now I know, okay, there are 87 records, but if I just say, okay, Krish, I'll be getting only 7 records, but I'll also be getting the count. It's totally okay for me. Now, next thing. For passing any sort of company code, my user needs to keep on memorizing. Okay, what are the particular company codes are there which are available at my UI level and what at the data level. So I don't think user would be happy seeing that, right? If I just say, okay, value help over here, I'm not getting anything. So if I want to add a value help as well over here, to altering any sort of UI, I mentioned that if it's a filter level, the consumption value help, consumption and level annotation would help us. Perfect. Now, consumption annotation would help us. So let's just have the consumption annotation again at company code level to alter the behavior of the filter. So I can say @consumption. Here it says value help annotation. So value help definition we can say. Now, when I say a value help, it means you are helping it with the possible values. So there are multiple company codes though. So there should be a data set, okay, which can help us with the possible values of the company code. Okay, so what would be the possible values of the company code? How I can get that? So you would be remembering something that we already discussed over here called a interface views, right? So interface views are mainly working on the transparent table, or we can say directly the tables. So if I say I want a company codes information, what I am mainly interested in? I am interested in company code master data. Okay, SAP has a naming convention that if it is creating a basic view, okay, for UI app, it is containing its name would be I underscore something. Let's say if it's company code, it would be company code. If it is creating any sort of basic view again, but for the purpose of, let's say, value help, these are the naming conventions that would help you out whenever you want to search anything standard that you want to utilize in your application. Okay, so SAP ideally go, if it's a basic view, by I underscore whatever is the information and capital VH. Okay, So this VH would ultimately be there for the value help. So let us just find if I am finding anything with the VH. I'll just say navigate over here, open development object. I'll be also teaching you how you can create your own value help. Okay. Currently we are using the one which is provided by SAP. We would also be creating our own value help that we would be using going forward. I can say I underscore. Here I can say company code I am looking for, but this time I am looking for something called value help. So if you see there are multiple value help, it's a company code, but it's a asset level value help. But not, I am not looking for company code asset. I am looking for company code instead. So here if you see, I have company code value help, which is a asset, which is a directly company code value help. It's not containing anything for the asset. It's just a header data. So I can just say okay over here to copy the original name. What is the original name? This is the original name. And here I can say, I can specify something called entity. If I just specify element over here, you would be directly getting the element which you would be mapping. Before that, what I'll need is, I just need the name of the entity which I'm also mapping. Now, this particular company code would be having an element called company code. So, why we have to map this element correctly? Because if you see, okay, because if you see, I am saying, okay, I want this value as a value help, which is totally fine, but it would show me 50 information because I have 50 columns as part of my value help. And which particular column should be passed as an input to BUKRS to get the data filtered correctly. So I'll say, okay, company code is the column which you can pass in the output to get the data filtered. I'll just say activate. Okay, and let me just say this as well. Now, if I just say I want to search for, let's say, something called starting with D, here you will be finding anything and everything which is containing D. So I can say, okay, I want to search for DV0, and I just type D and it is giving me value like this. Okay, so I can directly select it from there. Next thing I am willing to have is, let's say, DR. I'm getting the DR, and this data would get filtered. How this value help would be looking alike? It depends on how the value help is defined. So if you see, you have each and every company code listed over here, along with the company code name and everything, and you would be finding it over here, mapped directly. That would be used for the filtering. And how the system is knowing that this particular information, DR, I mean the column technical name, this company code name is something which I need to pass in my filter, because I mapped it in the element with the company code column over here, saying, okay, this BUKRS is the element that I need to pass to my company code over here. Okay, let me just show you one more thing over here. As and when we are doing the development, our annotation list is actually getting extended, and this is what my application is ultimately reflecting correctly. Okay. In the external annotation, you will be finding, okay, I have a header info, line item, selection field. So this, all the things are nothing but the annotation which are getting mapped to my Fiori list report application, and that is how we are getting it in my output. Okay. So what this is actually becoming, this is ultimately my backend logic which is giving me the data, and this another thing is nothing but my annotation, and this is nothing but my UI logic. Now we would be working upon to see how I can segregate my backend logic with the UI logic. Okay, that is something we will be finding right now. Before that, are we all clear till the stuff that we have covered till now? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, let's just say, yeah. Next thing I'll be going with is a segregation of the backend logic and the front end logic. Okay, fine. So we worked on the extensions of the CDS view, saying, okay, if I have a CDS view, how I can extend the existing CDS view. Same way, I also have one more extensions. Okay, if you see in the data definition, there is something called a metadata extension. So whatever I am generating as a part of a CDS view, what it is actually doing, it is ultimately generating me a metadata, right? Metadata of the service. So if I want to separate out my backend logic with the front end logic, because if you see this logic is growing on and on. So if this keeps on growing, then I won't be able to figure out, okay, where actually I need to fetch the data from if I want to write any sort of condition, and how the UI behavior I'll be able to control. So what I can generate for that is metadata extension. SAP ideally go by the naming convention, saying whatever is the name of your application base CDS entity, it also specify the metadata extension with the same name. So I'm just following the same path. I'll just go next over here, and I can say annotate view. Now, which particular view I want to provide an annotation for? I can say I want to provide an annotation for this particular view. Say paste. Okay. Here you would be finding metadata layer. Okay. So there are multiple metadata layer. If you see a press control space, then there are multiple, saying core. Core is nothing but which SAP has defined. Assume this is a particular list report, this is a particular base view. Okay. You are creating five different metadata extension files. Then which one should be considered while designing a UI? Okay, so the core is the one which is being defined by standard SAP. So core is a SAP level. You might be working in a service-based industry, so the annotation file that you would be creating, you should create it as a partner, because you are behaving as a partner for the SAP and helping any client to have a SAP implemented. If you are working as a customer, it means you are the directly customer of a SAP and you are using its box. So let's say if you are in-house internal IT team which is developing any sort of annotation file, then they need to define it with the name of a customer. But if you specify it wrongly, ideally it won't make any difference as such, but what would happen is if there are any annotation file already defined as a core and you are also defining it as a core, then of course the one which is defined earlier would take priority. Secondly, if there are annotation file defined as a customer, you are defining it as a core, then the customer would take priority higher than the core. So these are the priority level. Ideally, we will be defining it as a, let's say, partner. What all things we want to define for the UI element? So I can say I want all this logic to be part of my UI. So what you can directly go over here and say, copy this one, paste over this one, and going forward, let's just develop it over here. So you do not need to go with the copy paste. And here you are defining only the UI. Okay, so the key element, non-key element is not of the metadata extensions interest. So we'll just remove that. The comma would be replaced by something called semicolon. Second thing, if you are specifying UI annotation over here, it's not required anymore over here. So I'll just remove this from here. Totally fine. Third thing, any sort of UI thing which you are doing should possibly, wherever possible, should be there in the metadata extension to separate out the backend logic and the UI logic. So this is also a UI definition you have specified, but at the header section, so you would be specifying again it at the header section over here. Third thing, So these are the two things. One more thing is that, like for extending any sort of view, we have to specify separate annotation, right? That whether the enhancement category is specified correctly or not. Same way, if you want to allow any sort of annotation level extension called a metadata extension for a view, what you have to define over here is you have to specify in your base view, okay, in your base view whether the extensions are allowed or not. What it is termed as a, it is called a metadata dot allow extension. So when you say, okay, allow the extension for the particular metadata using a separate file, then it would allow you for the separate extension of that particular. Okay. So if you see, if I just save this again and just say activate, then you would be able to separate out your backend and UI logic. And if I just still go in my output UI and find how it is behaving again, you won't be finding any difference as such in the UI behavior. So this is how it would be looking like for now as well. One more thing, let's say I have multiple annotations specified over here for the UI library. Then I can specify it like separated like this, or I have one more liberty saying I can group it as well. So how you can group multiple annotation libraries in a single block? Okay. How you can extend, or we can say separate out the particular libraries in a single block. For that, we have something called a clubbing. How we can club multiple annotation? You can say, okay, UI level annotation these are, and here you would be specifying, okay, comma. As you have already specified UI, you won't be needing this anymore. So this particular view carries a selection free as well as line item annotation also specified. Okay. So this is how your UI level annotation would look alike. So these are the two ways with the help of which you can write this. Third thing, this would become my normal view. Now, if I just go back over here, if I just click on this is a totally blank page I am getting. This is something, an object page that we can also design and extend. This is something we would be seeing going forward. Before that, what we are more interested in, we are more interested in designing this particular page over here. Okay. So what we would be doing for that particular purpose? So we would be specifying, we would be extending our particular logic now. Okay. So let's say what we have over here is filter bar. Let's just start from the top. We have a filter bar, but do we have any sort of global search also available over here? No, right? So let's just have a global search also introduced for specifying any sort of global search. What we need @search dot searchable. So when you say search dot searchable equal to true, it would allow you to have any sort of global search defined. Okay. So it would allow you to have any sort of global search defined, and you would be able to define a global search. Now, when I say I'll be able to define a global search, but on what all fields I want the global search to work? For that, we have multiple information saying, okay, I want the global search to work on, let's say, the person who created that, the document type, or the NB, likewise. So let's say I want, okay, let me just extend this example so it would be easier to understand the global search as well. I'll be adding one more information for this particular view with a short text, let's say. For example, let me just say I want association of this view to happen with a company code table, here I'll be defining on $projection dot bucharest and I want one more field available over here. Along with the bucharest, I am also interested in my company code text always. Okay. There is something I want as a part of my output as well over here. So I can specify okay bu.txt over here, and I want it to be visible at my UI as a line item position. Let's just say I want somewhere in between. Okay. Okay. So one thing we are also missing upon is the search. So we specified the search, but we haven't specified the default search element till now. Okay. So whenever I am saying I want to search on something, I have to specify okay what all elements I want to search upon. So I can say okay I want to search on okay, let's just say I can group the annotation. I want to search on something called default search element true. So this is the field I'll be searching upon, and it's not that my user would be able to search accurately always. So let's say if I want to search for a laptop, I might type a laptop but with a spelling here and there. I am not sure whether L should be capital or not. So for that we have a fuzzy search available with us. The fuzzy search allows us to search based on a partial matching as well. So let's say if my output which I am getting over here is matching even 10%, then if I want the output, then my fuzziness threshold would be 0.1. If I want that if my output is matching at least 70%, then only I'll want the search to happen. Then it is called as a 0.7. So this fuzziness can go from 0.1 to 1, 1 being the 100% and 0.1 being the 10%. So this would be my one of the search field. Another field which I want to be there for the searching is let's say this one. For short text also I want the search to work. Let's say for the ER name also I want the search to work. So I can define the search over here. Okay. I can have this information also activated like this. Let me just also activate this. Yeah, now we don't have any error because the search default element is being specified. Let's reactivate this one. So if I just try re-executing this one, what I will be getting over here is something called a global search. Okay. So now you understand why the position should be in multiple of 10. So if you see, I was having a 10 over here, 20, 30 likewise. Now suddenly I came across a requirement saying, okay, I want a column also in between like this. Okay. Now as I want a column in between, I can't like readjust all of them. So what I just specified it as a 15. So I just came in between over here and I have the data correctly being presented at the required position. Now, what should I search? So I just enable the global search on this. Now I want to search for let's say Maruti. So when I say Maruti, though I have specify M as a capital, still it would search for the Maruti over here. Instead, if you see, filters are mostly type specific. Okay, so if I just say dv01, so it's automatically becoming in capital, so it won't allow me for now. But over here, I have also specified it on a dv0, so I'll be directly getting the output. So this is how the fuzzy search will work. So I have my global search defined. I have my filter defined. This is something we can call is the company code filter, and the date filter is also working. Now, let us just enhance the same report again. What we would be willing to have as a part of my output more. So let's just say I have a very important information available over here, which is something I can call it as a purchasing document. But is it standing somewhere different? Is it, am I identifying anywhere that okay, this is my key or something? No, right? So I need something using which I would be able to define that this is my primary key, and when I specify it as a primary key, I should be able to find it correctly in my output, highlighted somehow. So my user would be able to find, okay, this is my primary key and this is what the report is all based upon. What I can do for that? I can have over here. So as I am talking about the whole view, okay, and I'm not talking about one person over here. I'm talking about a whole view that this particular, all the data which is being presented, the primary key for all of them is this particular purchasing document. So what it would become? It would become a header level information for me, correct? So what I can have over here is I can have, let's say, object model dot, let's say, sorry, object model we already have. I can have a semantic key. So when I say a semantic key, what it would be meaning? I can say, for me, it would be nothing but a EBLN. So EBLN is nothing but my semantic key, which I am mainly depending upon. If I just say activate over here, as you can see, my particular purchasing document is getting highlighted, okay, as it's a primary key. So this is how highlighting I'll be directly getting. Now, next thing which I am more interested in over here is, let's say, for the particular information which I am presenting right now over here. Okay, let's say one, let me just also make you understand one thing. You might be finding that I am doing a UI behavioral changes with the object model annotation. Still, I am specifying this particular information in a base view and not in the metadata extension view. Correct. So let me just say I'm just copying this, commenting down it from here, and let me just specify it over here. So if you see, I'm getting a red highlighting over here. Because what is the purpose of metadata extension? The main purpose of metadata extension over here is for the UI changes, and it allows you to have the annotation libraries specified from the UI or the consumption. Object model is for the object level technical settings. Okay. So if you see, this particular object model annotation is not permitted to use in the metadata extension, and that is why I specified it in my base view somewhere over here. I specified that because it would give a proper meaning to my particular data. Now let's just try to make our report more neat and clean. Okay, so how I'll be able to do that? So whenever I am writing a report, let's say this particular company code is there, this particular company code short text is there. So the particular short text which I am talking about over here is having a relation with this So these two elements are correlated, correct? So why I want to display this particular code and the description? What my user would be actually seeing interested? What would be his interest? What he would be able to happy to see in the output? So I can say the actual text data. So I can say object model over here dot text element over here. What it is? It is nothing but this BUTXT. So for my company code, what I am just trying to say in my system is the short text which you are trying to search for is nothing but this BUTXT. Okay. Just activate this. Now if you see, I am getting the output combined in both of them. So now I am getting the company code as well as, okay, now I am getting the company code description as well as the code in the same place. So now I can get rid of one column. So I can have one column presenting both the information which I was looking for. Okay, so I can now just say, okay, I will have that field, because if you want to specify something in the text element, then you need that field in the data selection at the business level, business logic level. But here I don't need it anymore. Okay, here I don't need that particular field anymore, so I can just comment it down. I'll just say activate over here, and I will have this information available in a way that is more presentable. Okay, so I will have this information more in a presentable manner. Correct. Now, next thing I would like to have over here is, let's say, one more way of presenting a particular, let's say, okay, what we have also available over here in EKKO table that we can present in my output. Do we have a currency key? Let's just see if we have it. Yeah, we have a currency key available in my particular EKKO. So I'll just have it somewhere at the top, available over here. And I want to view my currency key as well. So I'll just use the same annotation because that position is now empty. So I can use it for displaying some sort of another data. So I'm just displaying one more column. Now, what we learned sometime back is, okay, so this particular has a INR, Euro, whatever currency is available, I have it available as part of my output. Now, what we learned sometime back is a value help, a way of defining a value help with a consumption value help. So there is something called a consumption value help. There is one more way with the help of which we can define a value help, and that is something I can name it as a foreign key association based value help. Okay, so the foreign key association based value help is something which I would like to implement over here as well. What is that foreign key association based value help? So if you see, when I say WAERS, what is that? It is a currency key. Now, when I say it's a currency key, then there would be a master data which might be having all the possible value, INR, Euro, and everything. Okay, over here. So, what is the particular base table for that? For that particular company code table, I can say currency key, if I just say right click over here, okay, we would be having something called a currency key, WAERS, and it would be having some sort of possible values there. TCURC is the table. It contains a currency key. Okay, so this particular currency key would have all the possible values, right? So this is something we are more interested in. So I can just say, okay, TCURC I can use directly from here to, okay, from here to I can directly use it somewhere in the association, saying for a particular purchase order, I can have either a 0 company code or 1. Sorry, 0 currency key or 1, because certain purchase order might be incomplete, that it might not have a currency key specified, like this one. There is a possibility, right? So I am just defining it like this, saying to TCURC as currency key specified over here on dollar projection. Okay, and here I want to highlight WAERS, and here I can say, okay, currency key dot WAERS over here. Okay, and what I'll be doing now is this particular currency key which I am using over here, I can expose this because I want to use it as a value help. Okay, so I can say, okay, now let's just have one thing. Currently this currency key we have just exposed, we haven't used it anywhere. It's just being displayed on my output like this. But in the filter, I don't have a currency key selection. Okay, so what I'll be doing now, I'll be adding one more filter for the currency key. How I can do that? It's a WAERS. So I can say this WAERS has a UI only with the line item. I want a selection field also. Let's say we have already 2 selection field. Let me just define it as a 30, for example. And let me just activate this one as well. If I just say refresh over here, the currency column was there, and I'll be also getting one more thing for a currency filter. So this is giving me possible values for company code using the consumption value help definition. This I have defined using a consumption filter. One more thing is there, which is a currency over here, but this is not getting any value. Now let me just try to use another way again to define what would be the possible values. For that, what I will be having over here, I will be having something called a foreign key association. Whenever you have an association mentioned over here, you can define value help using one more type. Let's say for this, I can define, one second, it's taking some time, just allow me a moment. Okay, so I have an object model. Now I hope you are clear that if it's an object model annotation, where I'll be specifying the annotation at my base view level. Okay, because it's a technical information I'm specifying. Object model dot foreign key association, and here you can specify the association. If you see, I have 2 association, but when I press Control space, which association I am allowed to use? Only the one which I have exposed. Okay, so if I don't expose this association, then I can't use it as a value help. I'll just say save and activate. I'll just say execute again. And here in the currency key, you would be finding all the possible values for the particular currency key. Okay, so let's just say I want to search for something called, let's say, INR or something. I'll be directly getting the list of values directly being presented. And these also feature from a list report automatically. I do not need to write any short of single line of code to achieve this. If I also want a euro, I can say okay. So I'll be getting the data directly filter for the particular possible values I am passing over here. So these are the two ways of defining a value help. Okay, either using consumption value help or the foreign key association. These are the two ways. I can also have primary key defined, which I just defined over here. Now let's just move forward over here. Let's just say I have a document category available over here. Now what is there for document category? Okay, so what is the document category I am getting over here is directly via my document category, maybe the BSTYP. So if I say BSTYP, let me just see what is the, okay. If I just go over here saying my BSTYP over here is having all these particular possible values. How I can get these particular possible values directly selected? Let's just say I want these values from a domain level. Maybe as per what I know, let's just try to have these values also available in my output. So this is ultimately a backend thing that these are domain fixed values. This, if I want in my output, then there would be a domain table that could ultimately help me out. It was DD07, yeah, DD07 view V, and what I can have over here is a domain name EBSTYP. Okay, now I want the values in English. So this ultimately is something which you can also Google. Okay, I was expecting that there would be a value help, I mean value table, so we can directly use the table, but unfortunately we don't have a direct table. Instead, what we have is a common generic table. So domain would have a fixed values. Now I want this values also to be as an output. First thing, we would be seeing how this would ultimately help us. So two ways of value help we already learned. One called value help definition, second called foreign key association. Third way of defining value help, which I would like to have over here, is called a foreign key, called model value help. Okay, I want a modeled value help with me. So what I can do for that? Fine. So to have a model value help, what I can define over here is a separate view. For example, I have the table. Now I want a view which is giving me this particular value. Let me just try that out. Define a view called data definition available. Okay, I want a BSTYP. What is the BSTYP named as the purchasing document category? I can say doc category value help. I can say value help for document category. Okay, let me just say next over here, and also define a value help with a define view. So you have to define a separate view for it. Okay, whenever you want to define a particular value help, you have to define a separate view for it. Now let me just say I want a value help define, and if I am defining a value help view, then I'll be first defining first of all the fields which I'll be getting the data from. I'll be just saying okay, fine, I will have a SQL view also for this. Data I'll be getting over here would be from my DD07V. Is the one. What all data I am expecting to have in my output? I can say I want the data first as a fixed values. So what are the fixed values I am getting over here? It's in a domain value lower. This is the one. I can name it as a okay. So this I can name as a, let's say, document category. Next thing I can name it as a, let's say, the description. So what is that? This is DD text. Okay, and we can name it as a, let's say, document category text. Perfect. Now I don't want data for each and every of them, so I can say where my domain name is something like this, EBSTYP. Perfect. And I can say I want only the data which is in a language English. Okay. Perfect. Let me just activate this and see what are the information that I am getting as part of the particular, as part of this particular example. So for that, let me just execute this. So what I am getting in, yeah, key definition would be different because I am getting the data from a separate table. Okay, so these are the possible values that I am interested to see in my output over here. Now, one thing to mention over here is what SAP follows ideally. Whenever you are defining a table, right, we define that whether it's a transactional or a master table or whatsoever data it is containing. Same thing we specified over here. What is the purpose of this view that we created? So here we can have object model over here, and the data category that it contains is something what we can call it as a value help. So we want a value help as a data category. Perfect. Next thing, what is the purpose of this view? Of course, we just missed the naming convention while actually creating this view. But the purpose of this view was definitely a basic view, correct? Now, what I want over here is, let me just say activate this one. So there is a separate view that I created called a modeled value help. Now this view I can use, perfect. This view I can use for my value help purpose, and where I have to define a value help. So let me just see, I have this particular list report over here, and here I want that particular view to be used. Okay, so I can just say, where is the metadata extension? I'll just go over here and just define my document category BSTYP, which is over here, and I just say consumption dot value help definition. You already know, we already did that earlier, right? Here I'll just specify entity, and here I'll be specifying my name of the entity which I just created for the value help purpose. What is that? What is that entity that I just created? Which was it? Okay, fine. It would be available over here. I'll just copy this. Let me just close the unnecessary tabs so it would be easy for us to figure out the data that I was looking for. Close this and close this and close this as well. Perfect. Now, the name which I'll be specifying over here is this, and the element to which it would be linked to. Okay, it would be the particular document category because this is a technical name, correct? So I'll be specifying it like this. Now, is there any meaning of value help if I am not specifying that field is a selection field, right? So let me just define a selection field as well over here, saying selection field over here, and it would become this time, let's say 40. There is a 4 field I am defining as a filter. Okay, it looks good for me for now at least. Okay, so what I'll be doing is I'll just say activate. I'll just go over here and just re-execute this. And what I am finding over here, I am finding that the data which I am getting over here in the purchase document category are the possible values. Okay, are the possible values which I was having over here. It's totally fine. It's for purchasing document category, but is the list too huge? I said no, right? So why to have a particular information in a value help rather than that if I want to show it as a drop down, let's say. Okay, to have any sort of values as a drop down, all I have to specify over here is I can say object model dot, okay, if we already have that object model is already available with us, so I can say okay, result set over here, and I have a size category. So SAP says if you want a drop down for any sort of value help, okay, what you have to specify is that the size category is very minimal. So if the data which you are specifying is very limited, then only drop down is very feasible. If the data is really, let's say, in the millions or thousands, then if it's in a drop down, then it would consume your whole screen. So what you have to specify over here is no, the size category I am specified is very small, called extra small. So if you just specified it as a extra small over here, then I just refresh it over here. Then you would be getting a drop down with all the possible values saying, let's say I want to filter it by F over here. Your data would be filtered by F, which is okay. Looks good, but not that good, right? Now, if I am getting a drop down, why can't I get the key? But my user don't know what is F, not what is A. What I am more interested over here is something I can call it as a text. I mean that this particular document category text I am more interested in. So fine. If that is the case, let me just define object model over here dot text dot element. Maybe you remember the time earlier when we specified the document category text. I'll just say okay over here. Object model text element we used earlier in our earlier view. One thing. Second thing, you have to specify the semantic text over here as a true. So it says these are the ultimately semantic text values for the key which I define over here. Okay, I'll just say activate this one. Okay, so what I'll just do is I'll just say refresh. If I just again drop down, here you would be finding okay, it's a request for quotation or the purchase order or the contract, whatever you are looking for. It's totally fine. If I am here this far, then why can't I use the particular view which I use over here for showing the information directly available in the view? So I can say fine, let's also do that. I can say association would be ultimately, let's say 0 to 1. Ideally it would be 1 to 1, but it, to be on safer side, I am just specifying 1, as I can specify, let's say, document category on dollar projection dot, I can say BSTYPO, which I have over here. I can say document category over here. I can have document category text, which is somewhere over here. Okay, and this I can specify it as a comma over here like this, and this particular text I can use again in my this particular BSTYP over here, saying object model dot text element. Let me just try activating this. That just got activated. Yeah, since now if you see, I have the information which is now usable by the user. Okay, so user would be knowing, okay, the information which you are talking about over here is request for quotation, purchase orders. So you want the request for quotation to get filtered. This is the one. You can directly say filter, and it would get filtered correctly. Okay, if you want, okay, not request for quotation only, but I want also the purchase orders to be available. So you will also get the purchase orders as well. So you can have as a value help the modeled value help. This is the one. Okay, these are we consume from the standard, which will provide you the value help. The date selection, you can also have the possible value specified by the association as well. You can have it as a drop down, and by specifying just the key, you can have the values also specified over here. This becomes how, and you can also specify the key, and the global search can also work. Next thing that we would be more interested in seeing is, what if for some scenario I want to give some sort of color coding. Let's say if the purchase order is there, then I want to highlight in a green. If it's RFQ, it means it's just in quotation matter. I mean, it's just preparation phase, so I want to show it in a yellow. If some sort of documents are there, which are, let's say, let's just say if something is a contract or something, let's just, if I want to show something in a red, likewise, if I want to give some sort of color coding as well, then how I can give that without touching my UI? I haven't touched my UI project since the time I just created that, right? So how that is possible, that is something we would be seeing in the upcoming session, and we would also be defining the object page at that time. And if the time permits, then we would be also seeing what all next things are there in the Fiori elements. But are we all clear till now?
Yes, so much. Rest we'll get to know when we practice.
Yeah, definitely. So ultimately, there is a thing like it looks straightforward, but when you practice, you will get more confidence. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So see you all again in the upcoming session then. Till the time. Bye-bye. I'll share the recording to all of you.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.